Right, hello, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and to everyone in Australia and New Zealand. Well, good morning, even to those outside of this area. Firstly, a big thank you to everyone for taking part and their time to watch this Opus IVS webinar on VAG Diagnostic Overview for the engine. This webinar has been created to give an insight into what is potentially available to you to be able to get the information required to help you diagnose a fault, on this occasion, the engine control module. Right, so let's get started. Now, this is me, Richard. Some of you obviously would have already spoken to me over the phone or in person at training events, whether it be here in Australia or back originally in the UK. I'm an Opus IVS Master Technician, and I've been with the VAG brand now for the past 23 years, and with Opus IVS/Autologic for the past 7. I originally started with Opus in the UK head office and then transferred to warmer climates here in Australia just under 2 years ago now. So as you can see on here, questions are turned on. So if you have any questions, please type in the question and then I'll do my endeavour to answer them at the end of the presentation. If not, then we can get in contact and I can try and answer your question there for you. So, VAG diagnosis overview, of the engine side of things. So, what's this presentation all about? I will take you through some of the hints and tips for gathering information required to help diagnose faults, an overview on what other important information is potentially available to yourself. This typical scenario here is basically got the engine management light shown on the dash. Now, with any training events, I do, or webinars like this, I do like just to remind everyone of the basic core of diagnosis. Sometimes we can overlook the simple things. This can be from any form of life, not just diagnosing a vehicle. Obviously not much currently, but generally we're a very busy lives. It's all too easy to not take a second to have a think and just evaluate the basic cause. There are many issues that a piece of information from a customer, which can seem nothing important, could actually link the system you're trying to diagnose and help you get there quickly and obviously correctly. But more importantly, it may not actually be a fault at all. It could actually be a characteristic of that specific vehicle, and it's just a case of knowing that because the customer may need to be notified of this special characteristic. So, let's have a look through this core chart. This is again on basic diagnosis and just making sure you get through the relevant diagnosis correctly. So, number one is obviously say verify the complaint. So, as I've just mentioned, making sure that is actually a complaint is there. So, there may well be speaking to the customer, the driver, however, because quite often someone just throws at the reception, there's my key, and just walks out. So I just walking into the doctor's and just going and sitting there and expecting the doctor to know what's wrong with you. Exactly the same principle. So then collecting the evidence. Again, if you need to road test the car with a customer, road test with them. If they can't do that, then try and explain to them that this will help you certainly diagnose the car quicker and correctly help them saving money, certainly yourself on diagnosis and those on fixing a part. Evaluate the evidence. So evaluate what you've got. And again, you may find certain systems are linked, even though you may not think it. So identify and isolate the fault. Likewise, repair the fault. And then check all systems afterwards, because we've all been there since you touched my car and so on. So basically check all the systems are correct. Again, you may find something still doesn't work. Was that still linked? Have you repaired it correctly? So, in this instance, we know, for example, that we've got the engine management light on. So, we need to connect battery support, which is all too important nowadays. Certainly with battery management and certainly complex vehicles, certainly drain the vehicle a lot quicker than you'd expect with just ignition on. So locate the diagnostic socket, connect the diagnostic tool. Right, So this is kind of the screen you would initially come to on an Opus IVS platform. In this case, it's the DrivePRO. So what we're after, firstly, will be the DrivePRO European, as we've got a Volkswagen on this occasion. Click on VAG. Then we need to go to automatic detection. This, as it says, will automatically detect the vehicle. If you are connecting to the same vehicle on further occasions, you can use the recent button, as all the detection obviously has been carried out previously. Right, so as we can find out here, it's found the VIN number and the model year. So you click on continue. You may need to select the vehicle variant, because from the VIN number decoder, the tool will not know which variant you've got, whether it may be a saloon or an Avant, or even say a USA, Canada market. So you need to correct the same one. Now, as you may find here, you could have a couple of different examples. You'll find this on the model number, which is located on the vehicle's data sticker, either in the service book if it has one, or in the spare wheel well normally. Then it will confirm the engine code, and you carry on forward by clicking yes. So, generating a quick test on a VAG vehicle. So you may be thinking, why am I adding this, how to generate a quick test, into this particular webinar? Yes, we do need to run one to diagnose the issue. However, on the VAG brand with the Opus tool, it is slightly different the way the quick test is generated to generate a report as it is to other brands. Some of you may not be familiar with the VAG brand, so here is then what I think to show basically how we can generate a quick test, so you can read that. Likewise, if you need to send for technical support request, you'll have a quick test will be generated to send through. So we'll click on quick test. What you'll find here is initially the tool will communicate to the gateway module, and it asks what control modules have fault codes logged. That is it. That's all it does, hence the quick test name. This originally came up when the first kind of vehicles didn't have actual main gateways. They just had a lot slower serial communications. So as you can see, all it says is faults present, nothing more. This is where some people may potentially get confused with other brands in generating quick tests. At this stage, nothing has been generated. All we know there are is faults present. Whereas other brands, you will find that it will go through and it has actually generated a quick test here. So what we then press is full fault report down towards the bottom left-hand corner. Now, what will happen, the tool will then go into the control modules only that have fault codes logged. In this instance, as you can see, we've got the rear camera system. Here is a fault, but we know how many fault codes have been logged so far, and the current progress is so far done 3 of the 4 modules we had fault codes with. Now, as you can see, here we have a lot more information. Oh look, so we know now the total number of faults stored is 4. And we can tell in which control module, each one, which and how many faults are stored in that particular module. In this instance, there's 1 in each, hence the 4 in total. Now is when you've got the fault quick test has been generated. However, we need to view that. So if you press fault code report down the bottom here. Now this is your quick test report. And what you will find is obviously vehicle information towards the top. Then you'll find the fault code information and then the data behind the particular fault code. And you can scroll up and down this depending on how long your list is. What you'll also find towards the top, this on the DrivePRO, is you can either print or email this report. Personally, I would always email a report to myself and save that on your own database in case you need to access this in the future and the tool itself is not available, or you wish to send a report to the customer or anyone that you believe should need that report. Now, this will then take you back to, as we were just now, on the screen with a quick test report once we come back, you can directly then go to the control modules in question with the arrow towards the right hand side. On this instance, obviously we're going to the engine control module as what we're interested in. So just a brief overview here, and I'll go into a couple of these options a little bit later, what we can and cannot look through. So we've got fault codes, obviously self-explanatory. Module information is where you can go in and get the information such as your software part number, your software version, any information that you need from the module information. Dynamic requests, this is where you get all your live data from. Coding, self-explanatory, where we potentially would code the control module. Output test, if available on this particular engine, you may have an output test option, so you can physically get the control module to actuate any particular component within the list that it's got available to see whether it's working. For example, evap control solenoid. Click on output test and it will then make the solenoid electronically click. If it clicks, then you know the electronics must be okay as it's activating the component in terms of the electronics to it. Control unit functions. This is where there are functions available for you to carry out particular tests. Again, we'll go through those later on. OBD readiness codes. Manual functions. This is something kind of VAG, so you can go through on some models, certainly not the newer ones anymore, but certainly a lot of the older ones, up to maybe mid-teens or so, you can go in manual functions through basic settings and adaptions and so on. And then common symptoms, anything with this particular variant that we know we've got a common symptom, we can then check. Again, I will go into that bit later on. Right, fault triggering. Let's just bring up the information here. Right, so where are we? This function on the Opus devices is not something even heavy VAG users know about. No fault of their own, it's just something that is not necessarily hidden, but something that is very useful in trying to get some information out, and certainly at a short period of time that you can then trigger, potentially even a fault trigger, so you know you can look at the information on when the fault triggered to give you an idea of trying to diagnose. So what we will click on is your dynamic requests. And this time what we'll find here is when you go into measuring groups, whereas VAG like to up and around the teens wise will give you an indirect number to select. You wanted to view. Most frustrating thing is they never used to number them, so you didn't know which one you are. It can be very annoying. I'll show you annoyments on that because it's not as easy to find out. Common measuring groups, where you go to select a group of data. For example, temperatures or pressures. Generally, you'll find this on the later models where they are grouped together. But what we're after for fault triggering is basically custom dynamics. Then we'll click on the Start Next button towards the bottom when we get through. Now, this is where you can select up to 8 dynamics to read. Simply press the arrow to the right of the beside the data you wish to see. Once selected, the field will highlight in white. As you can see at the bottom right hand side on this example, there are 22 pages to select. So there's a lot of information that you can potentially gather. As I say, up to 8 you can view at once. Once you've selected your selections you wish to choose from, you press Display Selected Dynamics in the bottom left. You can view these values either by analog or digitally. So via the values on the left, you've got analog as you would normally see that, or with any kind of informations, you've got the graphing towards the right. Or if you click on the white field where it shows the information, it will then change into a graph form. So if you click on, then we got towards the bottom, Start Fault Triggering. So you'll get a data login started. So switch on data login and fault triggering. So we click on Continue. Now what you will see is your own selections personalized here. Now I know it's not very clear, but you can also add a marker. For example, if you're obviously in this instance looking at a an issue with the engine, you may find you feel a little hiccup. Oh, what was that? So you can add your marker yourself. This will add a marker along the line, so you can go back and view the data on that particular line. I'll say, I know it's not very clear, but you can see how many markers have been added, and it's actually continuing to go through the information. So once we finish that length of time, we'll then obviously click on stop. It is OK the message, and it will obviously come up to say whether it's obviously information will be saved. Now, depending on how long you run this for, is how long obviously it will take to save that. So it can take a little bit of time if you've been running it for an extended period of time. So once we run the report, what you will find here is you've got a timestamp. So this will show down the left-hand side, obviously in split seconds. So you can see it's quite often, certainly around a second splits. Then you've got your selected dynamics that we've chosen. So engine speed, cooling temperature, pedal sensor, air mass, atmospheric pressure in this instance. As you can see in the top line, you've got basically user trigger. So this will be where you've manually added the trigger in. So you think, okay, there's your trigger, what you've chosen. You can have a look along the data line to see whether anything has stood out during that time. Now, one thing you'll find, which can potentially be a little bit difficult, is up until certainly recent vehicles, the default trigger where it gives you a red line, like in this example, doesn't show in the red line, because that's to do with, say, some of the later vehicle stuff. So on an older one like this, it will show you the fault trigger come up in red. So as you can see, the fault was triggered. On this instance, it's obviously self-triggered. So there's nothing has stood out, but it's something I wanted to obviously show you for this presentation. However, you may find, for example, if we're looking at the air mass value, it may shoot up really high, which is then triggered the fault code, and obviously it will be obvious as to why it's done that. Now, obviously, again, this one here, I've just triggered it in quickly twice, just to show it can then show up in red twice. This another example of this being a very useful tool and bit of information to yourself is ABS wheel speed sensors. Now, we all know with the Golf A3 platform, ABS wheel speed sensors can certainly stop the steering angle sensor basic setting going through, and they are critical as to what they read. So you can select the 4 wheel speed sensors and run through and have a look at the data as a quick step. It's a lot quicker than certainly reading it live analog on the data sheet. So you can then pick up which one you may have an issue with. So what else can we check within the engine control module? So back on the original screen, as I kind of discussed earlier, here are 2 of the other options that we can go through. Control unit functions. On this particular engine, we've basically got 3 options available. Again, it depends on the variant of your control module as to how many options you'll have. So in this one, we've got adapt engine to intake manifold flap, adapt engine to throttle valve control module. Fairly self-explanatory. So if either of those 2 components have been replaced or removed, you will basically need to go through and re-adapt them to the engine control module. Click on the arrow forward, another particular one you're after, and continue with the on-screen instructions. You may find, for example, on a diesel engine, that you will have many more options in there, like DPF regeneration, DPF pressure sensor reset, and so on. Common symptoms. Common symptoms on this particular engine, we've got cruise control is not working. So if we've got an issue with the customer complaint, the cruise control is not working, we can go in here and it pre-selects information so we can go through and test. So cruise control system check. So basically this will check initially your brake and clutch sensors positions. On this particular vehicle, it is an automatic, however, so it always says not pressed. However, a very common issue on a manual vehicle is the clutch positional sensor will continue to say pressed, which will obviously stop your cruise control working. So as you can see from the left, we've got not pressed. On the right, we've got pressed, so we can monitor the information. That now obviously concludes this webinar and information available to and how to kind of go through using the Opus DrivePRO or any platform from Opus tool. Hope you've enjoyed this webinar. Please look out for future ones coming. Please remember, obviously, the Opus IVS 360 team are here to support you during this challenging period. Obviously, don't hesitate to contact us if you need help for you in your workshop. So thank you for watching and stay safe. So let's just have a look and see what questions we had to come through. Right, so how many dynamic data picks can be graphed at once? On your screen, you can graph up to 4. Now, also just going into that there Keith, how many, obviously, can the graph picks be enlarged? Yes, they can. They can be enlarged. So again, you can fit basically up to 2 on the screen, and it pretty much splits the screen horizontally into 2, so you can see it a lot bigger to go through the information. Again, if you click on the graphing again, double tap on there, it then brings it up larger. Any more? Okay, that looks it for side of things for questions. By all means, say obviously any of the teams globally, whether it would be here in Australia, the UK, or in obviously America, we are here to help you through this time. So any help you do require, please contact the team. Likewise, any questions you've got for myself or any of the brands, please email or send a support request in, and we can try and do our best to help you. Again, thank you for watching and stay safe.